Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Lindsey Elmore Show. My guest today is Cara Loewentheil, and she and I talk about how we can retrain our brain to embrace true confidence. After that, I am going to be sharing one of my favorite techniques for going through negative emotions that create self-limiting beliefs. Fair warning, in today's show, there is a little bit more colorful language than we usually use. So if you've got some little ears in the room, perhaps save this episode for another time or listen to it on your headset. Let's get to the show. Welcome to the Lindsey Elmore Show, a podcast that helps you find fulfillment amidst chaos. On this show, I interview thought leaders, doctors, creatives, spiritual gurus, and game changers who inspire you to pursue your dreams, overcome obstacles, and leave your mark. Cara Loewentheil is a master certified coach with a Bachelor's of Arts from Yale and a Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School. In the last 4 years, she pivoted from a legal career and has grown her life coaching business from 0 to 7 figures. She is the host of the iTunes top-rated self-help podcast, Your Brain, which has been downloaded more than 15 million times. She has been featured in media outlets such as Marie Claire, Mind Body Green, MSN, and the Huffington Post. And today, we talk about how women can go from feeling empowered, pretending to be empowered, faking it till we make it, to true inner confidence that shows from the inside out. Cara Loewentheil, welcome to the Lindsey Elmore Show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm super excited to talk to you right now because I think right now there's so many buzzwords. You know, we've all been in our own homes and in our own brains for so many months now, and everybody's like, oh, we have to love ourselves more and take more time. And there's something in us that prevents us from really and truly loving ourselves and fully owning who we are. And you call this, full disclosure, parents, here we go. You call this your brain. You also say it's about retraining your brain. So tell us a little bit how we can change our thought patterns and change the way we think about ourselves so that we can truly love ourselves more.
Yeah, it's a huge project. So I like to recommend we just start with like trying to accept ourselves. Like most of us are so far from loving ourselves, and then trying to love yourself becomes like, oh my God, I'm doing that wrong too. And like, I should be already loving myself, right? It like just gets sucked into the kind of perfectionist, self-critical fantasy. So first of all, like, let's just go for trying to accept ourselves and like not judge ourselves quite as much. That's the first goal. So I think that most of us think that our thoughts about ourselves are just kind of objective. We just think we're observing ourselves, right? We're like, well, I am messy and I do procrastinate too much and I should lose 15 pounds and whatever it is, right? Whatever those thoughts are, we just think like, that's reality. I'm just looking at reality and informing myself of reality. But when you start to learn about the brain, what you realize is that your eyes and your brain and like all your senses that give you information about the world, they are not just like objective cameras capturing reality. It is much more like a drunk interpreter that is just making stuff up constantly and is just creating thoughts all of the time. And all of those thoughts are impacted by so many things, how human brains evolved, yes, whatever your personal childhood was like, but also in the place that I work on the most, what society taught you about how to think about yourself, about what is valuable or worthy about you. And a lot of those messages we get are based on things like race or gender or age or whatever. Society teaches us a lot of unconscious beliefs about like who's good, who's not, who's attractive, who's not, what women should be like, what men should be like, who's better than who, right? All that stuff, it all gets absorbed. And then it comes out in your own brain and it sounds like just your own thinking. It just sounds like, if I lost 15 pounds, then, you know, I would have an easier time dating. Or if I just got more done at work, then I would finally feel confident. So what I teach people to do, and especially women or people socialized as women, is to notice, learn to identify when that's happening in their minds, and then learn how to concretely, piece by piece, think different thoughts.
So, if we're going to think different thoughts, is it because you mentioned evolution, which I think is so important. And I'm also in the midst of reading The Girl on the Train. And there's a scene in the book that reminds me so much of what you just said, how we think we're observing objectively, but really we've got this like drunk interpreter. And there's an entire scene in the book where she's like, I never would have done this had I been sober, but because I was drunk, I didn't have the ability to stop myself before I made this mistake. I think the same thing happens in our minds. So talk to us a little bit about the way the brain is built that leads us down these more negative and self-destructive pathways, because you would think the brain would be built the exact opposite, where we would be like, oh man, wouldn't it? So talk to us about, so how is the brain kind of deceiving us in this way?
I mean, I do always say that, like, I think the brain is trying to help us. It thinks it's being helpful, right? But it's like, if you have a dog that barks at the mailman because it thinks it's protecting you, like, it's not trying to be mean to you or the mailman, but it's just very confused, right? Or like a toddler that wants to help you with cooking and accidentally, like, runs around with a knife. So there's a couple, our brain evolved in different levels. It's not like somebody, in my belief, of course, at least, sat down and was like, what would be a good design for a human brain? Let's do this all at once in a way that makes sense, right? Instead, we have the kind of primitive part of our brain that we share with most animals. And that evolved literally to just be like, eat, sleep, have sex, run away from scary things. That's it. That's all that part of your brain wants to do. Right.
And smell things and detect if something is poisonous. Yes.
Right. Anything physical, that part of your brain is just like anything a lizard can do. That's what that part of your brain is interested in. Right. Which is, for a lot of human life, even once we were Homo sapiens, most of life was still like, what can I eat? What's poisonous? What's going to try to kill me? How do I have sex and reproduce? Like, that was pretty much all that was going on. It's only pretty recently in our kind of species history that we've had to deal with things like civilization, much less email, right? This is all like pretty recent. That part of your brain is just like really not equipped, right? It doesn't understand the difference between an email from my boss who I'm scared of and something that is going to eat me and kill me. And so that's why you can have like this very intense physical reaction of anxiety or stress in response to things that are not actually physically dangerous, but that's the only way that part of your brain operates. It doesn't have a like subtle, sensitive danger system for a whole range of things. It's just like, might die, need to scream. That's what that level of your brain is, right? And then there's like multiple other kind of, as our brains have evolved, right? Often it's talked about as like 3 layers, but of course, really what it is just tiny evolutions over time, right? An incredibly complex structure. But for me, the easiest way to explain and teach it is basically you have the part of your brain you share with a lizard, and then you have the part of your brain you share with other humans. That's the part that can be like, we could build a skyscraper or go to the moon, like all of this prefrontal cortex, creative, advanced problem solving thinking, what's where morality and ethics come in. Like you have these like very simplifying 2 parts of your brain, all of which they're trying to work together. It's like trying to have an astrophysicist and like a screaming monkey try to work together in your brain to like get you through the day. And so it can be very confusing and there's a lot going on in there, right? And so most of us don't know how to calm down that more primitive part of our brain and how to train it to be less reactive. Remember, it's a part of your brain that you share with most animals. So just like if you have a puppy, you need to train it, right? Like, what is it supposed to chew? What is it supposed to bark at? What's actually dangerous? What's not? You actually have to learn how to train your own brain and how to react to stimuli in order to kind of calm it down.
What are some of the daily practices that you think people can start with? Little stuff. I hate when I hear from people about health and it's all about, well, you must do these 30 things all at once, because it's not how we're built. I mean,
who has the time?
No one has the time. And it's like you said, your brain is actually trying to protect you. Your brain is trying to protect you by keeping you sedentary, risk averse, overweight, and really only engaging with people on a survival level. But we as humans have come to this point where we're wanting to do more. We're wanting to embody more.
Right? Which is that society also teaches women in particular, like how they need to be accepted, to be loved, to be okay. And so when your brain is telling you that like you need to lose weight, or you should look different, or you need to make sure that everybody's always happy with you and no one ever has a negative thought about you, or you need to like never say no to anyone, right? And that taking care of yourself at all is selfish, like all those thoughts, even your brain's trying to take care of you because your brain is like, this is what I was told. Your brain is like, this is the handbook I got. You're supposed to look like this. You're supposed to act like that. Everybody should always like, this is what you told. This is what I was unconsciously told I was supposed to do. I'm just trying to follow the directions, right? But the problem is, of course, that like, if you just try to constantly live up to what society tells you women should be like, you'll be exhausted, right? And putting everybody else in front of you.
Well, because there aren't any two people that agree on what a woman should be. So what are some daily things? Simple, down to earth, meaningful stuff that goes beyond the looking in the mirror and saying the positive affirmations, because that's great. And I'm a huge fan of self-talk, but honestly, I think a lot of people who are busy, who are moms, who are trying to juggle so many different priorities, the idea of just, if I just talk to myself this way, everything's going to change. I don't think it's true. So how have you shifted your perspective from being who you are, feeling the way you feel, looking the way that you look, into a like, yep, this is who I am, this is how I feel, this is the way I look kind of vibe?
So I actually do think it is about talking to yourself, but I think most of us are not taught how to do it correctly, right? So most of us, like, if we're taught at all, first, most of us are not taught at all. We're just like, well, you think what you think, and then you just try to like believe something different. I mean, it's like, we say to people like, oh, you should like be nicer to yourself, or like be more positive, as if that's somehow like self-explanatory how to do that, right? It's like saying to someone like, you should just make a complicated chocolate souffle. And you're like, I don't know anything. Like, that's not, yeah, I agree. It would be great if I did, but I don't know how. So
yeah, it's like saying make a chocolate souffle and you're like, what's an egg? You don't even have a concept of where to start.
Or like, what am I supposed to be, right?
Yes.
So I'm a huge fan of what I call the thought ladder, or sometimes I call it, you'll hear people talk about like neutral thoughts or baby step thoughts, different terms. But the essential is, if your thought about yourself is like, I'm disgusting and no one would want to, like, no one is attracted to me, it's an extreme, but still, actually, I mean, most women are shocked when they figure out what they're really thinking. You don't realize how negative your subconscious thoughts actually are. So let's say you bring that up to consciousness. I mean, I'll have women tell me all the time that their partners are like, oh, only, having sex with them because like they're around. Like, that's how crazy our brains are, is like, we'll convince ourselves that even someone actively trying to sleep with us is not attracted to us.
Sure. I love the line in Eat, Pray, Love where there's two women, Julia Roberts and her friend, are there, and they're gorging on pizza, and it's the most delicious thing they've ever eaten. And then they start talking about going on a date, and this woman is like, I am so fat. I have gained so much weight since being in Italy. And Julia Roberts says, when is the last time that you got in bed with a man and you took off all of your clothes and he said, never mind? It doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen.
Anybody who sleeps with women, whether it's a man or woman, like, what a naked woman looks like, right? It's like,
and you can basically get the gist of it with the clothes on. We all have the same parts up underneath. It's all there.
Some range of parts, yeah.
Yeah, of course, a range of parts, but sure.
Yeah. So I think that, when that's your thought process, like if it's your thought process is like, I'm disgusting and I'm like, nobody would be attracted to me. You can't go to like, I'm a beautiful, confident goddess. Is just way too far, and you don't get remember, your brain is very lazy and it only wants to do things that like give it some reward immediately. So trying to believe something you don't believe, maybe if you could stick at repeating it 1,000 times with no progress until then, you might, but most people's brains don't work like that. So I always recommend that you find a very small step thought. Like, if your thought is my stomach is disgusting, you don't go to like, I'm a bombshell. You go to, this is a human stomach.